When I always say calories don't have to be counted for, what I'm really talking about is the fact that when you get insulin levels lower, it's easier for you to get into a calorie deficit. When people lose weight focusing on calories only and they don't try to lower those insulin levels, if they are an individual who has elevated insulin levels because they're insulin resistant being the biggest contributor to elevated insulin levels, they have their body working against them. What you're doing doesn't seem overwhelming or unsustainable, then just keep riding that train of fat loss, right? 1% to 1.5% is what I like for as long as I possibly can, but there is a threshold where I think that's going to slow down. The main things we're trying to do with fasting is reduce insulin levels and reduce inflammation via cellular autophagy. But truthfully, the most important thing first is the insulin, right? So that's what the bulletproof coffee thing is all about. It's the same concept, right? Let's nourish your body with energy. That's the whole point of eating is energy, but let's keep the insulin levels low. That's why bulletproof coffee is great. The only reason I don't recommend that for you guys in a weight loss program is because bulletproof coffee could easily get up to 300, 400, 500 calories, right? A single tablespoon of any fat source is usually around 120 to 150 calories. So I want you burning the calories from your belly and not the cup of coffee. That's the only thing. That's the only reason why I don't recommend bulletproof coffee for you. Now, if it works into your calories, even though you're not counting, but if it works into the plan, you feel really good on it, and you got a really good weekly rhythm of doing it, and you want to break your daily fast with bulletproof coffee, go for it. It's phenomenal for you. But as a thing to do, just because a lot of people lack that context and understanding. And now the only thing better than that would be just nothing, so that your body can get into that deep need to burn and mobilize the body fat from your body. So that's all it is. So MCT oil, same concept, whether you're doing it bulletproof style or whether you're doing it on your own. If it works into your eating windows, MCT oil is great. Some people actually notice cognitive lifting effects. Dr. Love, the famous neuroscientist on social media, is a good friend of mine, is a big advocate too of MCT oil as neuroprotective. It's one of his things that he recommends for people to feed the brain and protect against Alzheimer's development. So phenomenal. It doesn't taste great, right? It actually tastes pretty horrible on its own. Coconut oil tastes better. And coconut oil itself is also pretty nutritious. You get a lot of MCT oil from coconut oil, but MCT oil is like an isolated version of one of the types of fats that you would get from the whole coconut oil. So truthfully, if you're eating coconut oil, MCT oil, I think alternating is probably the way to go. So you get a little bit of the benefits of both. And yeah, that's basically it. And everything that we have to say about MCT oil. Questions about just daily steps. And you see a lot of people talking about your daily step goals. And so I wanted to discuss this. I won't give you guys a daily step goal. Not that it's bad by any means, but you guys know by now, the most important form of exercise is resistance training. Now, is there something to be said about your being a newbie and never having exercised and the benefit of having a step goal? Sure. In that context, in that situation, get your steps in. I'm okay with that. But I think you guys in this program, you know how we operate here. We do things a little differently, and we're way past that. I think most of us are way past the phase of steps being a big boost to our overall improvement. So that's the only reason. I don't have any problem with step goals, but I would rather your attention, because I'm a believer of we can only do so much at any given moment. We all have a finite amount of mental resources that we can allocate towards all these things. And so I want to give you guys the most strategic, most effective, highest ROI of your resources. And thinking about steps, if you have steps in your lifestyle, great. If you don't, worry about it. Don't go out of your way to add more steps. Go out of your way to add weight training. That's really what you need to do. Outside of that, don't stress about steps. Nothing bad, just you have bigger fish to fry, if you will. Body weight, BMI is not the best indicator, but it works when you're overweight because we have a ton of extra body fat. So as we get closer to our goal, then we need to start looking at body fat percentages and then deciphering from there. So total mass, lean mass, and tissue lean percentage. So let's see. What was your weight when you were on the scale?
176.
176. Okay. So we'll go with the 178, 176, close enough for
Yes.
the sake of this. Yep. So they're saying your muscle percentage is about 64%, right? So the non-fatty tissue, because it's not just it's organs and bones, but fat and muscle is the main thing we're looking at. So your lean mass is 114. And we go down here, your fat mass, so 33% body fat percentage. And in pounds, that's 57.6%. So now we're this next phase for you, Don. And I probably, depending on how that fit into your budget, but a test like this, if you guys have access to it, and you can fit in your budget every 2 months, I think is good if you're really trying to continue to move the needle and you want something really solidly objective.
It's not
So,
that expensive.
ladies, especially post-menopausal Caucasian women, have the highest incident of osteoporosis. And so this is really nice to get an idea of where we stand. And you're looking great. Bone health is looking phenomenal. And I'm not surprised because you lift weights, Don,
Yeah.
and weight training is one of the best things you can do for bone health. Like hands down, one of the most important things you can do for bone health.
And this is part
Testosterone,
of why my BMI sucks all the time.
yeah, exactly. Because you get more muscle mass on your body, the BMI gets skewed and it doesn't look ideal. Did the RMR test. So they're telling your resting metabolic rate is 1400. Now, mind you guys, the resting metabolic rate or the basal metabolic rate, basically the same thing. That's not the TEE. We want to remember that. Your TE, which is the final number in theory that you can eat per day and your weight shouldn't change. That's a combination of the BMR, RMR with a few other categories. Now, the RMR, BMR is going to be about 60%, 70%, depending on how active you are. The other categories are going to consist of how much you basically how much you burn. And sometimes they break that category down to actual exercise versus they have this other measurement, which is not intentional exercise, but like twitching and like unintentional movement, which I think is an interesting category. But nonetheless, this is how much you burn outside of just resting. So her total TE would be higher. Go ahead.
What's really interesting though, this resting metabolic rate is not my RMR test. This RMR rate is based off of just the DEXA scan. And then I did the actual RMR test, which was the actual like breathing into it for like 20 minutes.
Right.
But they were within like 60 points of each other. Like, so they were super close.
Cool. That's good to know. That's good to know.
Those results as well.
Yeah. We'll all look at that separately with you, but so this is great. This gives us an idea here. Although we know, guys, we're not counting calories. I think the rest of this is just plotting some additional pieces. This is nice too. This gives you another benefit of the DEXA scan is it gives you areas of your body where you can actually see fat mass versus lean mass, which is interesting too. And it's cool too. Awesome. I love it. I love it. Okay. So Don, I know you had some questions with where you're at. And I'd love to get into this because you're in that kind of second, third phase for people, something to them to look forward to. You've made phenomenal progress. You've stayed on the low dose, but I know you're looking to continue to move. So talk to me about some of the questions you have.
I think my biggest question, and I'm super glad that I did this because when I initially set my weight loss goal, I had set my goal with, I think that, 170 is probably a realistic goal weight because previously when I was 155, I was 16% body fat. But when I was 155 and 16% body fat, I was an elite athlete. I was a competitive CrossFit. I had a lot more muscle mass. But now if I look at this and I like math it backwards, I'm like 155, 160 is like probably in that 22% body fat range. And so now I'm actually thinking that given my current muscle mass, like 155, 160 is probably a realistic goal weight for me now.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Which makes me really glad that I did this too, because I wouldn't have known that previously. Previously, I was like, I don't think I can get to 155 again because I know what it took to get there. And I don't want to, I was working out twice a day and doing crazy stuff, but I had a lot more muscle mass then. I was, again, 8 years ago, pre 2 surgeries, and I was an elite athlete. I don't lift as heavy as I did then. I'm sure I've lost a lot of muscle mass.
Yep. Yeah. And you're on TRT too, right? Testosterone therapy or no? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So then you just had a question about a sort of like a target weight to have.
Yeah, like I wanted your opinion of looking at this. Do you think that like 155, 160 is probably, and I'll of course do this again in a couple months and reassess, but I'm thinking that 155, 160 is a realistic goal weight for me right now.
I like it. Just keep in mind though that as things potentially change, and as we get closer and leaner, that number might change, right? It's not static. It can change depending on what happens to your muscle mass. That's the variable, right?
And I have to, and I know that I have to keep that in mind too, because I have lifted my whole life. I have muscle memory. I don't have a problem building muscle. And when I hit this kind of second phase with you also, I was taking lifting semi-seriously in the first round, right? I was lifting 3, maybe 4 days a week and like lifting moderately for me. When I re-signed up for you, I'm back to the gym 5 days a week. I upped my weights. Like I am taking phase two very seriously and I'm lifting a
Yeah.
lot more. I'm lifting harder than I was and I'm lifting 5 days a week. So my muscle mass may change in round two too, what I'm calling round two.
Yep. And did you have questions about the rate too that you're losing? Wondering about that, or
You know what? I had messaged the flow hotline because I'm like, we did the reset 3 weeks ago and I lost a half a pound in the reset, but I not lost more than a pound since then. So I was a
okay.
little concerned and I wanted you guys to look at that. And but then
Yeah.
I thought about it today too, and I'm like, again, I've hit the gym a lot harder. So maybe that has something to do with it too. So
The biggest thing, and we're both keeping an eye on this, is the trend, right? Like that would be it. If the next 2 weeks it slows down even more, okay, we need to revisit. But if you stay solid at this rate and what you're doing doesn't seem overwhelming or unsustainable, then just keep riding that train of fat loss, right? 1% to 1.5 is what I like for as long as I possibly can. But there is a threshold where I think that's going to slow down.
yeah.
And could you stack more AOD? Sure, there could be things that we do. Could you get more aggressive with it? Yeah, if you told me like I need to lose faster, but there's not really a point of doing that, right? Don't fix something that doesn't need to be fixed is a really powerful thing, unless you had some reason why you needed to get there faster. Then okay, we can have that conversation. But if it's not broken, if your new thing is I will lose a 0.5% every week and you stay there, we're gonna get there.
Yeah.
And slower body weight loss is always a good thing. Is that pretty much, would you say, the end of your questions?
Yeah, no, and I'm good with that so long as we're in communication and we think everything's fine, right? Because I don't need to lose massive amounts of weight every week. I understand the downside of that as well. So long as we think we're okay, I'm okay with that. I also just started my Motzi this week too. We'll see how that plays into
Awesome.
it. So,
Yep. That's gonna play a big role. Speaking of that, speaking of rapid weight loss, you guys might have heard these crazy things about blindness with GLP-1 medications. And so that was on my list to talk about that. And rapid weight loss just cues me to jump into that. None of you guys asked me that. Maybe no one's worried about it, but I thought I would bring it up just in case it comes across your lines. It is something that is definitely needs more research behind it. Essentially, what they looked at was it was a retrospective study just looking at the amount of people that were on medication, specifically diabetics, to keep that in mind, but people on GLP-1s nonetheless. They did have a higher rate of this particular medical condition, essentially lack of blood flow to this anterior part of the optic nerve to the eye. And if that condition progresses, it could cause blindness. So it's definitely something that they're looking into, researchers, and trying to figure out. And I certainly would never say that's not possible because you guys I've always said this. Medications have risks. And so it's not surprising to me that we're seeing this. I've been saying this from the beginning. We might find out some even more crazy stuff in the future that only time tells. I hope we don't. I don't think we will, but I don't rule that out, which is why it always brings me back to the use it respectfully and get off of it. Although this is the first major thing that I've seen that is concerning, because just a couple of weeks ago I was like, we haven't seen anything. This has been amazing, and now this pops up. It's a constant dynamic thing that's moving. But the thing that I would say, talking with other medical practitioners, if you have a history personally of diabetic retinopathy, sorry, then yeah, maybe don't use this medication. But for people that don't have eye issues, it doesn't appear that there's something to really be concerned about. Although this concept of blood pressure shifts and rapid weight loss that contributes to blood pressure shifts are one of the pre-existing conditions that can reduce blood flow to the nerves. I've always told you guys I'm not okay with you losing as fast as you possibly could, because if I didn't put that cap at 1.5% and you fasted for 48 hours and you let yourself enjoy the appetite suppression, I've seen people lose extremely, like 3% of body weight per week. So we don't want to do that. We never want to do that. Plus, rapid weight loss can also contribute to gallstones too as well. And so it's always good to keep our weight loss in a controlled weight rate. We don't want to lose too fast. Also, skin elasticity does become a greater concern. I talked about that with the surgeon, Dr. Benson, who I did a podcast with, and we're going to be doing more podcasts together. Actually, he's probably the best plastic surgeon that I've ever had the opportunity to come across and start networking with. He's actually here in Colorado too. Super cool guy. But yeah, I don't have any particular reasons to be concerned about that topic. And also just bringing it together, we don't want to be losing weight too fast for all those reasons. And look, calories matter, calories don't matter. And just in case this gets confusing, calories absolutely matter. But when I always say calories don't have to be counted for, what I'm really talking about is the fact that when you get insulin levels lower, it's easier for you to get into a calorie deficit. When people lose weight focusing on calories only and they don't try to lower those insulin levels, if they are an individual who has elevated insulin levels because they're insulin resistant being the biggest contributor to elevated insulin levels, they have their body working against them. They're trying to eat less, but they can't get into a deficit. So calories still matter, but it's this signaling agent, insulin, which against their will puts them at a surplus, even though they're trying to eat at a deficit. And insulin can do that because insulin can drive your hunger up, and insulin can lower this number right here, your RMR. And so if you have insulin lowering this number, doesn't matter how low you go, it becomes this game where you end up in that plateau when you're barely eating. So just thought I would bring that up too as well.